And welcome back. Let's go ahead and take a look at how to write our own static methods. I've gone ahead and given some starter code here to do a very simple example. So I have a averager program here, and you can see it is a static method that we're going to end up calling inside of our main. And I'm going to go ahead and started it. And we're going to say, please enter numbers to be averaged. You may terminate the list with a negative number. So we know we're going to need to, of course, keep track of some things here. So I have my scanner KB equals system scanner in. I might move this around later because, of course, I might need it here for main, but I'm just going to leave it here for a second. And we're going to say we're going to loop until, of course, we have a negative number. Now, we, of course, are probably going to want to keep track of some things. So, for example, I'm going to want to know the total, right? So I'm going to want a variable for that. So that's going to be double total. I'm going to, of course, probably need to keep track of how many iterations I have. So int, let's just make that a count. And we actually can initialize that one to 0. We might want to do the same thing with total because that's going to give us a good starting point here. And we can say, wait, while true. So what are we going to do inside the loop? Well, every time we go through this, we want to look to see, first off, if the number inputted is going to be 0. So let's just go ahead and assume we have a double because we can, of course, have doubles here as well. So we're going to say double num input is equal to kb.nextDouble. And what that, of course, will do is get whatever number the user wants to have typed in. And we can then check if num input is less than 0, because, again, we're looking for a negative number here to terminate this. So we can just say break. All right, and that will, of course, break that loop and allow things to continue. So if it's not negative, what do we want to do? Well, we want to take total and add to it whatever number was inputted. So add to it num input. Now, we, of course, also need to keep track, though, of how many inputs we've gotten, which is why we have the count plus here. And, of course, it's very important we do this after we do this check because we don't want to throw our count off. Now, of course, to get average is pretty simple. We simply just take our total and divide that by the count. And you'll notice that I did not have to get an input here. I'm not worried about any parameters. So let's just go back to our main now and actually use this. Well, if we want to invoke this, if I just say averager, open close parentheses, and hit the semicolon, you notice I didn't have to put the name of the class here. I could, but because we're in the same class here, it works out pretty well. So if I just call averager, you notice I didn't have to create an object for it. And because this is a static method, it allows me to do that. So I can just call averager, and it'll do anything here that's inside of this code. So if I just run this, it says please enter numbers to be averaged. So let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just for easy purposes. Hit enter. I'm going to do -1. And, oh, we did not get anything outputted. Why? Because if you notice, how do we set this up? We set this as a return type. If I wanted this to print this instead, I could, of course, do this in several different ways. I could change this to a void type and then have it print this. So system.out.println. And then I could say something like the average is. And this, of course, could do the same thing. So if we run that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -1, we get the average is 3.0. Now, if I wanted to keep that with the double here, obviously that's a very easy thing to fix. I can just put the print line around this. So both of those ways will work just fine. But what if I wanted to create another static class method? Well, it would be the same process. So let's do this one now, though. Let's make this one a return here, just for easy purposes. Let's just make this one a int, and we'll just call this one add nums. All right, now this one, let's do with parameters. So I'm going to have an int num1 and int num2. Now that means we're going to, of course, have to pass those in here. If you look and say, oh, I don't know what this is because we haven't put that return type in. No problem. Well, what is this one going to do? Well, it's simply just going to return num1 plus num2. All right, and that's all I need to do for that. It's a pretty easy one. All right. Now, if I wanted to do something where I'm getting it from the user, then of course I could modify. I could take, for example, these parameters out and use these. Now, this, of course, this add nums here. Do we really need a method for it? No, we could just say num1 plus num2. But for our demonstration purposes of this method, it works perfectly well. Now, this one, if I do this, I don't have a print line statement here. So I need to do here print line, and I'm just going to do add nums, and I'm just going to pass in what two numbers I want to add. So let's just say 5 and 7. All right, which should be 12. And let's go ahead and put a semicolon there. And so if we run that, let's do our averaging. All right, we get 3.0 and 12. And again, you'll notice with this static method, all I had to do was put the name of the method here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that even though these are static methods, these are still within the same class. If this was not in this class, let's say I had another class here, I would have to precede this with the name of whatever class I want to use. So for example, as we've seen with math, if I want to do math.pow and I want to put in, let's say, two numbers, let's say 4, 2. One of the things that we keep in mind here is this .pow is the same thing as what we're seeing here with like averager or add nums. The math dot has to precede that because we're not in the math class. We're in lab 6.4, which means if I had another class, let's just call it my class, I'd have to call this my class.pow 4, 2. So just little things like that to keep in mind. But again, this is a great demonstration of how we can start using static methods to start building things out and use them in a different way than we're used to with our non-static methods. Both have their uses and both are going to have their purposes, as we're going to see as we dive deeper into our coding.